Hi everyone, it's Jen again, back with another development video. I'm still working on mission 2 for Esper X Guide and the second anomaly dungeon, where you will be using Guide Laurent to explore and destroy 2 aberrations. So this past couple weeks I've been adding the mechanics of the dungeon. So I had the dungeon layout and the rooms created and the kind of random dialogue with Laurent as you're exploring. So I am kind of implementing enemies. There is now a new enemy type. You can hear that the music's a little bit different this time around, that it is the tutorial music. These are what I'm calling shadows. They are optional, kind of like mini, slightly less powerful versions of the main aberration that you'll have to fight. So this is like a shadow version of the main aberration, not Gatekeeper, because Gatekeepers will always be optional, but the main aberration type is called Lighter, and these are Wick. And Wick is just a shadow version of the main aberration that you can kind of either fight to get a better idea of like what type of stats, what type of strategy you might need for the main aberrations. None of the strategy is too complicated yet on the common enemy types, so this would be more of like just kind of testing your stats. But you can also get items from the shadows, so if you want to collect extra ether, that will be a good opportunity to hunt them. But you can also just totally skip them, so if you don't want to fight the extra little shadow guys, there's 7, but you can avoid them by avoiding the tiles that they spawn on. Right now, I had done a visual check for the enemy type, and I didn't like the placement that it was on the battlefield. It was a little bit too low, that Ember felt like she was kind of floating above it. I wanted their feet, like when she's kind of like charging the enemy, to match up with where the enemy was standing. So I'm going to go in and adjust all the sprites real quick by importing them into Photoshop, kind of collecting them as a group, shifting their position. Now you could shift the position in renpy itself, but because I have all the enemies set to be in one position and interchangeable, I don't want to have to create a conditional to make this enemy in a different position, if that makes any sense. So I'd rather change the sprite's placement within its own box than to change the position in renpy, because then that would screw up the positioning of all the other enemies in renpy. So yeah, that's why I am moving the enemy on these sprite sheets instead. I also want to kind of adjust the color just a little bit, because even though when I was coloring the sprite, I was looking at it against the backdrop, seeing it within the game itself, I want to add a little bit more mood lighting on it. So I am going to go ahead and create a couple filters to overlay it to just kind of help it blend into the background just a little bit more. I felt like it just felt slightly out of place. So yeah, probably not needed, but just something that was bothering me a little bit. So you'll see me going in and trying to adjust the color a little bit and make it have a little bit of soft lighting. So what else was I doing this week? I was doing a lot of soul searching. I had a pretty busy but productive week at work, where we're kind of tying up all of our like summer programming and stuff, and that was exciting to see sort of the fruits of my labor at work come to a nice closure. Moving on into the fall season feels like a start of new beginnings for both like my workload and just my overall like mood in general, because fall is my favorite time of year. It's been cooling down finally, so I've been enjoying walking my dog more. And whenever I get to enjoy walking outside, that's always really good for giving me time and space and just that fresh air to sort of give me a little more clarity of mind when it comes to envisioning my future and the future of my projects and where I kind of feel like being and what I feel like doing. I've mentioned before in my other videos that I always like to have a schedule or a goal in mind. Not so much because I need a carrot at the end of the stick, but because let me rephrase that. I do like having goals, so I guess I can't deny that that is a form of carrot on a stick, but it's not so much like wanting to finish a particular game and then expecting my life to change in any meaningful way once I reach the finish line. It's more like having a path towards like growth and what it is that I am trying to experience as I develop my games. So I am a firm believer in enjoying the process, but the process has to be intentional, at least for me. It can't be just like, okay, I need to make a sprite. Okay, I need to write the story. Okay, I need to code the dungeon. Like, I have to have some higher purpose in doing these things. And certainly there is like a story and there is symbolism and there are like ideas that I have about the world that I want to insert within my storytelling. But also I want to have a sense of developing myself as a person through the process. Like, I don't want to just repeat processes over and over and over, because then it's sort of hard for me to feel like it's meaningful, and it feels more like just a means to the end. And that's where you really get that like carrot on a stick feeling, where it's like, I don't want to be where I am right now. I just want to be at the finish line. So like some of the goals that I had creating EXG was that I wanted to work with vectors, because I felt like that would, with the GUI, I felt like that would open up a whole new skill set to like force myself to become more comfortable with like that way of thinking. And it really is, to me, a different approach than how I would normally kind of approach art, by just converting, like digitizing traditional processes of like inking and coloring and shading, rendering, that sort of thing. Like, I have a very traditional approach when it comes to that, versus like working in a vector program. It's not just taking line work and like converting it to a digital format. It's not just me drawing with a digital pen instead of like a traditional pen. It's now thinking about like working with paths and how do I add and subtract shapes from each other to create the shapes that I want. So being able to think and approach visual design in that way helps me expand like my skill set to not only create vector graphics in 2D space, but it also helps me work more in a 3D space as well, or in a lot of like the fabrication machines I have at work. It helps me to work in like G-code, basically. Anything that requires that is like all going to be like vector based. So that was one purpose that I had in mind during my process, like one of the intentions that I had in developing my process. Same with like coding. I'm always trying to find ways to improve my code in small increments. Like, I don't expect to suddenly be able to be a master programmer and do everything properly or like efficiently with the way that somebody who's, you know, been trained in computer science and has like decades of development under their belt. Like, I don't expect to make those type of gains with every game that I make, but I do hope to get a little bit better, a little more organized, a little more efficient. So one of those ways that I try to improve for me is an easy thing to try to intentionally keep in mind is I trying to avoid using if-else statements and just like simple variables. So I still use these things, but I try to come up with a way, like I try to consciously think like, is there a way that I can avoid doing that? And if there is, then let's try that first. So hopefully with like that level of intention, I can slowly force myself to improve, kind of like the same, like forcing myself to make vector graphics for the GUI. I could have just done, raster graphics and high resolution, and probably nobody would know from a user standpoint. But it's that intention towards developing my process. I don't want to just repeat the same processes over and over again, because even with intention to further develop myself, there's still going to be a lot of repetitiveness. That is the nature of like making games, animation. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of built-in repetitiveness regardless. So at the very least I can do is try to consciously do something to like break that up a little bit. And I'm hoping that, with that intention of like trying, it's not so much that I'm like putting a whip to my back that like I must get better. Like I used to have that kind of mentality when I was trying to improve my artwork, and I would get really frustrated with myself because I didn't have an intentional process to improve my artwork. I just wanted my artwork to be better. So like a lot of times I wasn't really trying to approach anything differently. I wasn't really expanding my repertoire. I wasn't really doing research or like actively like learning. I was just like kind of bumping my head into the same wall over and over again and just thinking if I practiced enough, then it would just get better. And yeah, with a certain amount of practice, I did eventually get better. But I would say that progress was pretty slow because I didn't have that growth mindset. I still had the carrot on the stick mindset where it's almost like I didn't care how I got better. I just wanted to be better already. So I think that if you're patient with yourself when you're doing anything that requires a lot of work and a lot of knowledge and a lot of skill and a lot of ongoing development as a person, and if you think of like your growth as just being I'm not doing this to make the next masterpiece. It's not a means to an end. It's investing in myself to be the type of person who can always make something like worthwhile, or who will mostly make things that are worthwhile because of how much I've invested in myself. That whether I make this type of a game or that type of a game or an animation or a comic or a novel or whatever medium that I feel like working in, even if I'm like sewing or cooking, I tend to shoot for excellence because it's all an accumulation of investment that I've put into myself to being present in the process and learning the process and moving forward in the process with intention to develop myself. Not so that I can make the best game on the planet, but so that I can become more skillful in everything that I do in every aspect of my life. And that's one thing that working outside of the arts, having a profession that is not like directly tied to my artistic skill sets, has taught me is that it's not that not working in an artistic field did not render my art training irrelevant. My art training helped to establish all these neural pathways in my brain for creative problem solving, for learning different types of design software, for being able to think like a designer, that those types of skills are useful for all types of different applications. So maybe game development is not for you. Maybe you're interested in something totally else that I'm not sure why I clicked on this video. But if you approach life, I think, with an intentional mindset to invest in yourself as a person, just to become better in all aspects of your life, I think that it really does like carry over. Like, the more competent that I become in different things, the more confident I become in different things, the more comfortable I become in myself. The more comfortable I am in myself, the kinder I am to myself, the kinder I am to myself, the kinder I am to others. And I just become an overall better person through these processes. So it's not just about making a game. It's about becoming a better person. And I hope that everybody has some type of avenue to pursue a process where they can just work on becoming a better person. Not because you owe it to the world or you owe it to others, but you just owe it to yourself. Because life is so much more interesting and exciting and fun, and you can take some pride and control. The more competent you are in these things, the more you can take control of your immediate environment. I'm not going to say that you can transform the universe. I'm not sure that my sphere of influence is that large, but I can certainly influence my immediate environment. And the better I become at these things, I feel like the more that I can envision the little bubble around me, the more that I can expand it. And that part is also exciting. So I'm not sure exactly where I'm going in all of this. I am happier with how these sprites turned out after I edited them. I did this a couple times where, sometimes I get it right the first time, and I like how how it turns out after I've done a visual test of it. I've gone back, I've edited the sprites. Sometimes I end up editing the sprites like, woof, I don't even know how many times I edited Jade's Comlink sprite. And I did it many, 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 many times over the course of her idle frames. And once I finally had the look of her idle frames the way that I wanted them, I applied that same process to her other expressions. But yeah, I probably struggled with her for, I don't know, at least a couple hours this morning, just because I wasn't satisfied with it. I didn't want to settle, and that's probably a me problem. I don't know how many people would look at it and even know the difference between, seeing her at 80% opacity and seeing her at like 60% opacity. That's I have a feeling that really is just me. But I don't know. I guess if I feel satisfied, I feel like I can take criticism and I can take feedback with more grace, because I can, I guess, more easily separate myself from my emotions to say, well, I know what I was striving for, and I didn't compromise in that. And so now if I hear somebody's feedback and their critique, I can decide with more confidence whether or not I want to take their critique and make changes from there, or I want to, I want to just kind of decide, make the executive decision as it's my creation to say, well, we have a difference of opinion. I'd rather go with like my idea. Again, it's about having intention versus like just being lazy. I want to be able to say, okay, we have a difference of opinion, but I'm not just being lazy and stubborn. I honestly just don't think we're on the same page, and I want to go with my page because this is my project. And having the confidence to be able to know, I think, the difference between what might be just your ego or your own like insecurities and sensitivities, like trying to create a defensive barrier against the critique, or just knowing with confidence that you have a difference of opinion from someone else, and that you stand by your decision even if it makes you unpopular. Okay, well, I think those are all my thoughts that I have for right now. I always end up going off on tangents that aren't really related to game development. But I hope that you are having a good week. I hope you are having a good weekend. I'm excited about having a long weekend, that I've got Labor Day off tomorrow. So I am very sorry for all those laborers that still have to work on Labor Day. We should do something about that. I'm certainly not going to go anywhere and, cause any more work for any service workers tomorrow. And
Yes.
As always, if you're working on anything, please continue to enjoy the process and take pride in your self-improvement. Take care. Bye-bye.
Agent Esper.
Agent Esper. Yes.
Agent Esper.